أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفر به ونؤمن به ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله وكفى بالله شهيدا. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن الحكيم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الذين آتيناهم الكتاب يتلونه حق تلاوته أولئك يؤمنون به ومن يكفر به فأولئك هم الخاسرون. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه صدق الله وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه آمين يا رب العالمين. It has become part of the recent trend in Western civilization that there has been a lot of talk of rights, human rights, animal rights, women's rights, labor rights. And this talk of rights, while this particular discourse is new in recent history as it emerges from the Western civilization, the idea of hukuk is nothing new to the Muslims. From the very beginning, we have been talking about two types of hukuk, two types of rights. Rights of Allah, hukuk Allah, and rights of the people, hukuk al-ibad. When we talk about hukuk Allah, it is not conventional to discuss hukuk al-Quran in relation to hukuk Allah. But I think that hukuk al-Quran, if there is such a thing, ought to be part and parcel of hukuk Allah. I have an ayah to back me up. Ayah 121 of Surah Al-Baqarah, which says, الَّذِينَ آتَيْنَاهُمُ الْكِتَابَ يَتْلُونَهُ حَقَّ تِلَاوَتِهِ. Those people to whom we gave the book, they do its tilawah, they recite it, حَقَّ تِلَاوَتِهِ, as it ought to be recited. The tilawah of Quran has a haqq upon each and every Muslim. If you follow this logic of thought, of haqq tilawah, you will discover that there are gradations, there is a level. There are levels of hukuk. There are different types of hukuk of Quran. And that's what I want to hammer on today. Hukuk of Quran. Does the Quran have a haqq on us? If the ayah is telling us what I think it is telling us that when you approach the Quran, you have to give it its due, its haqq. What would be the hukuk al-Quran? In short, there would be 5 hukuk, 5 levels of engagement that every Muslim ought to fulfill in relation to the Book of Allah. First of all, every Muslim is to have iman in Quran. Number 2, if it's a book, it ought to be read. So, qira'atul Quran. Number 3, if it's a book, it ought to be understood. Therefore, fahmul Quran, understand the Quran. And there is no understanding of the Quran without acting on it. So number 4, follow the Quran. And number 5, share it, propagate it, give it to others. 5 levels of engagements, 5 hukuk of Quran upon every single Muslim. Have faith in it, read it, understand it, follow it, give it to others. Let's go one by one. Iman. Iman bil Quran. When we talk about iman, we usually translate the word iman with faith or belief. Faith and belief may or may not have anything to do with iman. But faith and belief alone are inadequate translations of the concept of iman. In fact, iman is one of the central ideas in Islam. I have a teacher who used to talk about philosophy of iman in the Quran. So faith and belief is not sufficient, it's not adequate. However, for my purposes, I'll use it. What then, how can we define iman? I'm going to take help from a Christian, modern Christian theologian who has written a book on faith. He said, faith is one's ultimate concern. And I think this is true when we explain iman. Whatever is your ultimate concern in life, that is the object of your iman. It could be the pursuit of happiness. It could be running after the American dream. It could be fame, fortune, power, whatever it is. Whatever is the ultimate thing that you seek, desire in your life, that is the object of your iman. Whatever concerns you ultimately, whatever is your ultimate concern, whatever keeps you up during the night and wakes you up during the morning, at morning, that is your ultimate concern. Iman has to do with what is your ultimate concern. 3 ultimate concerns in Islam in relation to iman. Tawheed, iman billah. And then iman bil risala. And then, what's the third? Iman bil akhirah. These are the 3 concerns, ultimate concerns in the life of a Muslim. Here I'm going to focus on our Quran as our ultimate concern. So, we talk about 2 levels of faith. Al-Iman al-Haqiqi and Al-Iman al-Mawruthi. Iman al-Mawruthi is the inherited faith. I am born in a Muslim society. I do as the Muslims do. I see people praying. I see people fasting. I see them giving zakah. I see them going to Hajj. I do the same. It may be that I have no clue why I'm doing this, why this has any meaning or purpose. What is the meaning behind it? What are the maqasid behind it? I may or may not know. But I do as the Muslims do. This is inherited faith, which is faith nonetheless. However, Quran says that this level of faith is not sufficient. It's not adequate. Iman, the inherited faith, has to do with what I do outwardly. It has to do with my tongue. It has to do with my actions. How do I inherit faith? I say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, I become a Muslim. It matters not if I pray, it matters not if I give zakat, it matters not if my behavior is properly in line with the dictates of the Quran. The moment you say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, you're a Muslim, khalas, end of story. This has to do, inherited faith has to do what I do on the outside. But Iman al-Haqiqi, true faith, has to do how I feel on the inside. One is the outer facade, the other is the internal reality. One is doing something simply because it is what is done. The other is doing it because it is what burns you on the inside. Iman al-Haqiqi, true Iman, Iman al-Mawruthi, inherited faith. What Quran demands, what Allah demands from us, is Iman al-Haqiqi, true faith, burning faith, vibrant faith, live faith. This is the faith in the Quran, at which point the Quran becomes your ultimate concern. But the problem is, if you have this inherited faith, then that's all you have. And what is demanded is Iman al-Haqiqi. How do you go there? Well, Iman al-Haqiqi is conscious faith. It is faith examined. Inherited faith, faith unexamined. Iman al-Haqiqi, faith examined. Faith with an intellectual dimension, faith with an understanding. How do we get there? Follow obligations 2 to 5. And that's your road to Iman al-Haqiqi. Again, every Muslim has 5 obligations in relation to the Quran. Have faith in it, read it, understand it, follow it, give it to others. Number 2, reading the Quran. There are 2 types of readings. The general word for reading in Arabic language is qira'ah. And it is a profound moment in human history that the beginning, that the foundation, that the roots of this orientation we call Islam begins with a command. And that command is what? Iqra. This is profound in the history of religions. That a faith, a religion, a community is instituted by a command. And the command is what? Read. This is something profound in our history. And this is something we ought to highlight as a root of Islam. It's the command to read. Different types of readings. One is a passive reading. That's how we read newspapers. That's how we engage on reading on social media. Passive reading is not reading which is done for any spiritual, ethical, intellectual transformation. That's leisurely reading, which doesn't lead you anywhere. Then there's something called active reading. Active reading is a process. It's a process of engagement, of receiving the text, of imbibing the text, of pondering over the text, of analyzing the text, and then letting the text transform you in the process. That's active reading. The type of reading that the Quran demands from its followers, from its readers, is active reading, not passive reading. The type of faith that it demands is true faith, Iman al-Haqiqi. The type of reading that it demands is active reading. Qira'ah is the general word for reading. Quran uses 2 more important words. One is tilawa, the other is tartil. Tartil is this slow, measured, reflective reading. Usually it's done during prayer, especially tahajjud prayer. You recite, you ponder, you weep, then you go on. So, in the early days of Islam, Prophet ﷺ engaged in tartil. Ya ayyuhal muzammil qumil layla illa qalila. Wake up during the night, half of it, or a little more, or a little less. قُمِ اللَّيْلَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا نِصْفَهُ أَوْ انقُصْ مِنْهُ قَلِيلًا أَوْ زِدْ عَلَيْهِ وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا. And do tartil of Quran. What is tartil? Slow, measured, rhythmic, reflective reading of the Quran. This is tartil. This is specific to the Quran. Then there's something called tilawa. Tilawa comes from the verb tala yatlin, tilawatan or tulman. Literal meaning of tilawa is to follow someone behind, step by step. Is to mimic someone. This is tilawa. So the idea of acting on the book is already built into the word for tilawa, word for recitation. There cannot be, you cannot fulfill the haqq of tilawa till it is followed. Because that was tilawa is. Tilawa is to follow someone behind, foot by foot, step by step. Every Muslim then is required 5 obligations. Have faith in the Quran, read the Quran, understand the Quran, act on the Quran, and share it with others, propagate it. Now the question would be, we have tilawa, recitation, leading us, demanding us to act on the Quran. How do we get there? There's a bridge between reading and acting, and that bridge is understanding. So the third obligation is fahmul Quran. Iman bil Quran, tilawatul Quran, amal bil Quran. Fahmul Quran, amal bil Quran, and tabligh Quran. Now, understanding. Here again, I'm going to talk about 2 levels of understanding. Ayah 190 of Surah Al-Ali Imran. إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. 2 levels. يَذْكُرُونَ ذِكْر, تَذَكُّر. And وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Fikr and tafakkur. These are the 2 wheels of every attempt to understand the Quran. One is dhikr or tadakkur. The other is fikr and tafakkur. What's the difference? Tadakkur has to do with the surface level of understanding the Quran. The minimal understanding. which is available, accessible to every reader of the Quran. Doesn't matter how educated, doesn't matter how knowledgeable, doesn't matter what the background, what the culture. Only one condition. If you go to this Quran with an open heart, with a sincere intention, it will guide you adequately to the level of your intelligence. This is open to all. Anyone who goes to the Quran with an open heart, open mind, clear intention will have some level of understanding which is sufficient for their guidance. This is tadakkur, simple. Tadakkur appeals to the human fitrah, to your spirit, to the moral sense that human beings have. Surface level of understanding, available to everyone, tadakkur. But then there is a different type of reading of the Quran, of understanding of the Quran, at the level of tafakkur, which is not available to everyone. This is a lifelong study. It's a specialized field. You can spend all your life trying to dive deeper into the ocean and never come out step, except but with a drop. Tafakkur is a specialized field of study. Anything that you know will help you understand the Quran. You have to know the Arabic language. You have to know hadith. You have to know usul al-fiqh and maqasid al-sharia. And you have to know all the other Muslim sciences. That's not enough. Then you have to go outside the Islamic tradition. Physics, philosophy, sociology, anthropology, psychology, political science. Anything that you can bring to bear upon your reading of the Quran will have to help you dive deeper into the Quran. Tadakkur, simple, available to all. Tafakkur, specialized field of study. Two levels of understanding the Quran. Quran also uses other words for tafakkur, tadabbur, tafakkur, istinbat, fu'ad, so on and so forth. Let's go through the motions again. Every Muslim is required to fulfill 5 obligations in relation to the Quran. Number 1, Iman bil Quran. Number 2, Qira'at al Quran. Number 3, Fahm al Quran. Number 4, Amal bil Quran. Number 5, Tabligh al Quran or Da'wah ila al Quran. We've gone through 3. Moving on to number 4. But before we move on to number 4, I want to hammer a special point in relation to understanding the Quran. I was once talking to a friend, and I was trying to impress upon him the importance of learning the Arabic language in order to gain access to the Quran, in order to gain deeper access. But he argued with me that there are so many translations of Quran in so many different languages that if he just consults enough translations, that will be sufficient. I agree that translations can take you a certain way, can help you understand the Quran up until a certain point. However, if you want to dive deeper, there is no foregoing the Arabic language. Let me give you an example. I recited an ayah when I was talking about reading of the Quran from Surah Al-Muzammil. أَوْزِدْ عَلَيْهِ وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا. Rattil, tartila. Rattil comes from the verb rattala yurattilu. And tartila is the infinitive, the masdar, the verbal noun from the same verb. If you translate this ayah exactly literally, it comes out and read the Quran reading. That's the literal translation. Read the Quran reading. But in English that doesn't make sense. Why? Because the infinitive there, which is tartila, is called maf'ul mutlaq. And maf'ul mutlaq can only be translated in a certain way. It's an emphasis. It's trying to tell you when you do this tartil, give it its haqq. وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا. If you don't realize that this tartila here is maf'ul mutlaq, you will miss the actual highlight. It's supposed to hit you. وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ is one meaning. But when you say وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا, that adds emphasis. It adds tawqeed. Without knowing this, the poignancy, the emotional, the sentimental, the emotional intensity will not hit you in the heart. Let me give you another example. Surah Al-Kahf. فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمْ إِن لَّمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ أَسَفًا. فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ. The word بَخَعَ نَفْسَكَ means to kill yourself, to wanting to kill yourself out of grief. O Prophet ﷺ, perhaps, لَعَلَّكَ, perhaps, بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ, you will kill yourself, asafan, at the end of the ayah. Baqa'a already means to kill yourself out of grief. Why is there special asafa, which also means sadness, grief, melancholy? Because asafa there is maf'ul li ajlihi. If you don't realize that asafa there, that is maf'ul li ajlihi, the dagger in this ayah doesn't hit your heart. That asafa is supposed to pierce your heart, if you understand the right intonation. If you don't understand the right intonation, you read it as just in the passing. Perhaps you will kill yourself out of grief. Now, if you go to the Quran itself is insistent that there is something special about this Quran being revealed in the Arabic language. 11 ayahs altogether. Let me give you some of them. Inna anzalnahu, we have revealed it, Qur'anan Arabiyyan, an Arabic Quran, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, so that you may understand. وَلَقَدْ نَعْلَمُ أَنَّهُمْ يَقُولُونَ إِنَّمَا يُعَلِّمُهُ بَشَرٌ. We know that these people say that this Quran has been taught to the Prophet by bashar, by a human being. But what is the problem? يُلْحِدُونَ إِلَيْهِ أَعْجَمِي. The person that they're pointing to, that they're indicating, is Ajami, is a non-Arab. وَهَذَا لِسَانٌ عَرَبِيٌّ مُبِينٌ. And this Quran is in lisan, now tongue, language, Arabic language, but not just any Arabic language. Arabiyyun mubin, self-clarifying language. What is called Al-Arabi al-Mu'alla, the classical Arabic that the Prophet spoke, that the pre-Islamic Arab poets spoke. And once again, قرآنا عربيا غير ذي عوج لعلهم يتقون. كتاب فصلت آياته قرآنا عربيا لقوم يعلمون. Again and again, 11 times, Quran mentions, emphasizes, stresses this Quran is in Arabic. And if you want to dive deep into the ocean, there is no way getting around learning the Arabic language. Why am I mentioning this? Because we are about to launch a course in this masjid in about 2 weeks. It's called The Basics of Quranic Arabic. I will be teaching it. And just a brief mention that language has 2 aspects. Language has its structure, its grammar, and it has its content, the vocabulary. This course is going to focus on the structure of the Arabic language. The structure that you need in order to learn the Quran, not the whole of Arabic language. And I'll mention later some other details after the Quran. Now let's continue. Faith in the Quran, reading the Quran, understanding the Quran, and now acting on the Quran. Again, when it comes to faith, Quran has to become the ultimate concern of our faith. When it comes to reading, Quran has to become the ultimate concern when it comes to reading. When it comes to acting, understanding, Quran has to be the ultimate concern of human understanding, of Muslim understanding, education, research, and reflection. And again, when it comes to acting, following Quran, and by extension, the example of the Prophet have to become the ultimate concern. 2 levels of acting on the Quran, individual and communal. Individual level has to do with those teachings of the Quran that an individual can carry out in his or her individual capacity no matter what. Wherever you are in the world, you can pray. Wherever you are in the world, in whatever capacity, in whatever situation, you can fast. Individual teachings, wherever you are in the world, you can speak truth. You can be good to your neighbor. These are those teachings of the Quran that have to do with the individual, that you can follow no matter what. No conditions attached. What is the ultimate objective of individual teachings of the Quran? It is to produce a good human being. Why do I say that? It has come to be that especially in the West, the ultimate objective of nations and the ultimate objective of educational systems of nations is not necessarily to produce a good human being. It is to produce a good citizen, a good labor force, and a good patriot. A good citizen and a good patriot in modern understanding, in the modern superficial understanding of patriotism, is a citizen who stands with his nation, with his people, no matter what. If the nation and people happen to be committing genocide, you stand with your nation. Why? Because they're my people. It's my nation. That is not the ultimate objective of the Quran's individual teaching. The ultimate objective of Quran's individual teaching is to create a good human being. What is a good human being? A good human being is the one who's spiritually vibrant, morally upright, and intellectually dynamic. That's a good human being. The one who's critical of power. The one who's critical of his own tradition. One who's critical of all that he engages in, but not a blind follower. Then the second level of acting on the Quran is communal, collective, social. Here, what is the ultimate concern? What is the ultimate objective? It is to create a good human society. A good human society, or a good Muslim society, is a society that promotes peace, not violence. Is a society that promotes solidarity and brotherhood and fraternity and equality between all human beings. These are the ultimate universal principles of any Islamic polity. A good Muslim society stands with the victim no matter who they are, wherever they are, Muslim or non-Muslim. A good Muslim society stands against the oppression and against the oppressor, no matter who they are, wherever they are, Muslim or non-Muslim. Two levels of acting on the Quran, individual and collective. What would be the manifesto of the minimal manifesto of a good Muslim society? It's my contention that it would be Surah Al-Asr. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاسَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاسَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. This ought to be the minimal manifesto of any good Muslim society. Every Muslim has 5 obligations in relation to the Quran. Iman bil Quran, Tilabat al-Quran, Fahm al-Quran, Amal bil Quran, and then number 5, Tabligh al-Quran. Let me close with this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Yunus, قُلْ بِفَضْلِ اللَّهِ وَبِرَحْمَتِهِ فَلِذَلِكَ فَلْيَفْرَحُوا هُوَ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. Say, tell them, O Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, بِفَضْلِ اللَّهِ وَبِرَحْمَتِهِ. This Quran is by the fadl of Allah and by His rahmah. This Quran is by the grace of Allah. Fadl is that which you do not deserve, but is given to you as a bonus point. This Quran is by the fadl of Allah, is by the grace of Allah, and by the rahmah of Allah. فَبِذَلِكَ فَلْيَفْرَحُوا. Then let them rejoice because of this. If Muslims have any reason to rejoice, to celebrate something, it is this, that you are the custodians of this book, of this last testament of God. فَبِذَلِكَ فَلْيَفْرَحُوا. Let them have farah, let them celebrate, let them be happy because of this. هُوَ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. It is better than everything else that they amass. All that you do jam'ah of, all that we accumulate, all that we run after, all of that pales in comparison to هُوَ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. This is better than everything else that they amass. If this is the greatest treasure we have, then as good Muslim beings, as good human beings, as good Muslims, it is our responsibility to give, to share this treasure with the rest of the world. Every Muslim has 5 obligations in relation to the Quran. Have faith in it, read it, understand it, follow it, propagate it. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والمسلمات. الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على أفضلهم وخاتم النبيين محمد الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. عباد الله رحمكم الله اتقوا الله إن الله يأمركم بالعدل وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. أقيموا الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.